I got the invitation to go on this Armed Lutheran radio show, though. You know this guy? Have you seen this? There's two things that I would like to say that make me feel safe. Number one, the fact that there is a radio show called the Armed Lutheran Podcast somewhere in the world. That makes me feel safe.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I am your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran. Welcome to episode number 480. Little delayed and a little different than I originally had intended. My apologies for that, but thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week. Welcome back. Thank you to all of the members of the Reformation Gun Club who make this show possible, and unfortunately I was not able to get together with this week. Had planned that episode 480 was going to be our monthly online hangout. Had some personal family issues that I had to deal with. I'm not going to get into, and I appreciate your patience on that, and I appreciate your prayers for those of you who expressed your concerns. I appreciate that. All is better. Not perfect, but better. Family is never perfect, but it can be better. Anywho, so we were going to have our monthly online hangout. I need to get something out for one reason, mainly that the next two episodes have already been recorded and are already numbered, and I don't want to have to go back and edit them, pull them off of the hosting service and re-edit everything. Heck with that. I'm going to insert something in the middle here that I've been thinking about as episode 480. So welcome to episode 480. I really do appreciate you being here. Again, Reformation Gun Club members, God bless you. I love you. You'll be getting an invitation for our next online hangout soon. And I appreciate your forbearance. Folks, if you would like to support the show, if you would like to be invited to future online hangouts, visit reformationgunclub.com or visit the website, kind of redesign the website a little bit at armedlutheran.us. And I did have some folks suggest that I needed to make a fix on something. The feedback page, I've gotten messages and I've had some people say that it's not working. So give it a shot if you want to reach out. I would like some more feedback on how that's working. There is a button, Contribute to the Mission, that will take you from the new website to our page at Give, Send, Go, where we do our fundraising. They are a Christian fundraiser crowdfunding organization. They don't engage in any kind of viewpoint discrimination, so don't have to worry that if we say something about, girls and boys being different, we won't, risk having our show taken down. But if you'd like to help support the show, really would appreciate it. Go to reformationgunclub.com. Look for a link in the show notes for this or any of our past and future episodes. All right, so what are we talking about today? We are talking about some craziness involving the Southern Poverty Law Center, the SPLC. You've probably heard some of the more shocking revelations that came out of the Justice Department recently. If you have not, allow me to catch you up. And I will tie this into the gun rights debate here shortly. The SPLC raises money from donors. They go back to I want to say the 70s, maybe the 60s, to identify and track extremist groups. They originally started out with something called, they kind of cut their teeth in lawsuits against the KKK and other white supremacist groups. They had something that they published, I don't know how often, something called Klan Watch, where they kind of kept up with what they, knew things that they'd found about the KKK, and they warned people about it. And I think I did some research. Heritage Foundation has great information. They're frequently quoted by major media outlets, including Fox News, even recently after the most recent revelations about the SPLC. Fox News was still citing them as a source. They were a civil rights nonprofit founded in 1971, here paraphrasing from the Heritage Foundation, in Montgomery, Alabama. They started as a public interest law firm suing groups like the KKK, and later expanded into tracking extremist groups and quote unquote hate groups. And I'll explain what I mean by the quote unquote in a minute. And started producing educational materials on bias and tolerance, quote unquote. And I'll explain the quote unquote on that in a minute. The strongest criticism of SPLC is that they've never really done anything useful, and that they've broadened their targets to sometimes label mainstream conservative or religious groups as hate groups. So they've gone beyond tracking groups like the KKK. And the summary of what they do I found interesting. The best SPLC is best understood as a real civil rights advocacy organization with a long history of important anti-Klan work, but also one that has become highly controversial because of how broadly it defines extremism and how it uses that label publicly. Whether someone thinks it is wrong, the group is wrong, depends on whether they see it as a watchdog against hate or as a partisan group that overreaches and damages reputations. In other words, to summarize that summary, whether you think SPLC is doing good work depends entirely on your politics. It's a partisan activist organization that targets conservatives and Christians and labels them as hateful, and extremist. In the early 2000s, they changed their focus from the Klan because the Klan was kind of defunct at that point. Nobody really, in 2000, who really wanted to be associated with the Klan? And who were you going to sue? Because they didn't have any membership and they didn't have any money. So they had to expand their operations at the SPLC. They created what they call the hate map to point out locations started out with Klan chapters around the country and organizations that were associated with the Klan. As the Heritage Foundation puts it, it was a map to show you who to hate and where they were. But if you dig into the list, if you dig into the map, it's not just the KKK, it's not just neo-Nazis or the American Nazi Party. It's some other groups, like Moms for Liberty, or the Alliance Defending Freedom, or the Family Research Council. Good friend of the show, Rob Morse, his wife, founder of the Ruth Institute, Jennifer Roback Morse. She founded the Ruth Institute as a Christian foundation that defends marriage, defends the family, promotes traditional values and traditional sexual ethics. Wonderful lady, wonderful organization. They're on the hate map, along with the Klan. Moms for Liberty got on. Here's how Moms for Liberty ended up on the list. They are a parental rights organization, and the SPLC moved from publishing information about discrimination and tolerance from their educational materials, the tolerance part got into things like critical race theory and the trans ideology. And they were putting this stuff in schools and promoting it as early as kindergarten through a program that they developed called, quote unquote, teaching tolerance, which is ironic. So Moms for Liberty is formed in the wake of all the COVID nonsense that was just destroying kids' educations. And in response to some of the nonsense that groups like the SPLC are pushing in schools. And so, wouldn't you know it, Moms for Liberty is on the hate map now. That's so very tolerant, don't you think? There's apparently, according to Heritage, there is a third group of organizations on the hate map that might not even exist. In an interview I read at Heritage, the guy mentioned a place called the Wild Men's Surplus and Herb Shop. Apparently, it's a one-man store, some dude selling herbs, and he just happens to have a Confederate flag in his store. And he's on the hate map. Not that he was actively funding or fomenting extremism or colluding with hate groups. He was just proud of his Southern heritage, I guess. I don't know. But that person is on the hate list with actual neo-Nazis. The fact is that America is the most tolerant country on earth. We are the most racially diverse and yet the most tolerant. We have our problems, but we are the most tolerant on earth. If we were not, there would be a heck of a lot more unrest, I suspect, given the level of fraud and grift and lawlessness in certain ethnic communities. You'd think if we here in America were so racist, we'd have a Tulsa race riot just about every weekend in places like Dearborn and Minneapolis. But no, we're not racist to that extent. America is so tolerant that we will sit back and do nothing while third world trash comes invading our country through our southern border, thanks to the Biden administration, kills and rapes our citizens, and steals our tax dollars. But I digress. Getting off the track here. My point is that a decline in hate is a good thing, but it's bad for business at groups like the SPLC. They constantly send out fundraising messages to their potential donors, telling them that hate is on the rise and there are 1,200 hate groups in America, when the truth is, most of it they manufactured themselves. They play with the numbers too. So groups like Moms for Liberty, they have like 100 chapters around the country. That's 100 hate groups according to the SPLC. Not one hate group with 100 chapters. It's 100 hate groups. And this map is part of the pattern of violence that we see in this country on the left, that everyone keeps trying to say happens on both sides, but that's BS. It doesn't. And in the case of the SPLC, it has led directly to violence. Let's not forget 2012, the year that I started blogging. The Armed Lutheran blog started in 2012. A man took a gun into the headquarters of the Family Research Council in Atlanta, I think. He planned to shoot every employee and he brought a bag full of Chick-fil-A sandwiches because, to the left, Chick-fil-A is hate chicken. Chick-fil-A gives money to some of the groups that the SPLC calls hate groups, like the Family Research Council. So the gunman, he goes in and decides he's going to kill everyone there and stuff their dead mouths full of Chick-fil-A sandwiches. He told the police this. The guy didn't get shot. Well, he didn't get killed. I think he did get shot when he was arrested, but I don't think he was killed. He told police that he targeted the Family Research Council because of what SPLC had labeled them as a anti-gay hate group. Now, SPLC, of course, condemned the shooting, but the Family Research Council is still on their hate map 14 years later. One of SPLC's own employees was later charged with domestic terrorism in Atlanta. I don't know how that case played out. Something about throwing firebombs at Atlanta police. I don't remember. I have to look that up. Not important. Their work was used by the Biden administration, and that piece of crap, Attorney General Merrick Garland, thank goodness that he did not get on the Supreme Court. What a piece of garbage he is. He used reports from the SPLC to target what they called radical Catholic groups and Catholic churches. Basically, any Catholic church who was teaching traditional biblical definitions of marriage, those people were extremists that needed to be tracked down. Remember, it was Merrick Garland who told the entire country that the greatest threat to America from extremist terrorism was right-wing conservative religious groups. And parents, like the parents of the child who was raped in Loudoun County, Virginia, by a trans kid who was allowed in the girls' bathrooms. Those people like you and me, were the extremists, according to Merrick Garland. Garland's predecessor, James Sessions, had banned the FBI from using SPLC as a source, but Biden was happy to meet with them dozens of times in the White House. They wanted to use SPLC's research as justification for their surveillance on domestic terrorist threats, basically American citizens who have different political opinions. Now, back in 2019, when they fired their co-founder and swept a very ugly discrimination and sexual harassment lawsuit under the rug, there was a whistleblower who came out and said, basically, let the cat out of the bag. The hate accusations are basically just a con. They're a con to bilk donors out of their money. And lo and behold, what happened this past, I think it was last week? The Trump Justice Department announced that the SPLC has been indicted by a grand jury for, get this, funding, not investigating, not reporting on, funding extremist organizations. Taking the money that they are given by their donors and actually giving it to groups like the KKK, millions in funding, to foment extremism. They spent money on groups that their reports said were irrelevant. They gave money to the groups, those white supremacist losers who marched with their tiki torches in Charlottesville, Virginia that time. The source of that whole fine people hoax that the media still, some in the media are still spouting today, even though it's been completely debunked. The SPLC was hoping to artificially gin up the racism that they need to justify their existence, because a tolerant America is bad for business. The racism that they need doesn't exist in sufficient quantities. So why am I talking about this? What does this have to do with guns? Well, I'm talking about this because what happened at SPLC is exactly what happens in the gun control movement. The reality, as I talk about in a future episode, is that, and as we've said many times on the show, gun violence, mass gun violence, the chance that you will be affected by it is incredibly rare in the United States, especially when it comes to things like mass shootings and school shootings. But you would not know that if you only get your news from Democrats or the media or from so-called gun safety organizations who all get their data from places like the Gun Violence Archive. Gun Violence Archive is probably the most cited source for statistics on gun-related violence in the United States, and their work is quoted by media outlets, gun control advocates, Democrats, entertainers. They are influential in a similar way to SPLC. They're basically the same, except that, as far as we know, Gun Violence Archive isn't taking money from donors and giving it to mass shooters. We don't know. I'm not suggesting it, but that's the only way the two are different. There is a similar incentive structure for Gun Violence Archive that encourages them to play fast and loose with the numbers, just like SPLC. Now, the FBI does not have a mass shooting definition per se. They define mass killings as one where 3 or more victims are killed. So they define active shooter incidents. They have a definition for this, one where 1 or more individuals is actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a populated area. They don't have a mass shooting definition, like I said, per se. Gun Violence Archive is happy to provide the definition, and they kind of blur it and make up their own as it suits their needs. Gun Violence Archive defines a mass shooting as an incident in which 4 or more victims are shot or killed, not including the shooter. And they do not take into account the motive. So a gang war is a mass shooting. A drug deal gone bad, if 4 or more people are shot, that's a mass shooting. A familicide, where a parent, usually the father, or a male child, a disgruntled male child, shoots himself and his family, that's a mass shooting. Teenage gangbangers are counted as child victims of gun violence. A killing spree, I think there was one recently, not long ago, I couldn't think of it off the top of my head, but there was one we talked about many times that happened in California some years ago, pre-COVID, where this disgruntled tweaker went through the waiting period in California to get a gun, then drove to multiple places and shot people. And in some of those places, it was less than 4. And in some cases, he knifed them or hit them with his car, but that whole incident was counted as a mass shooting by the Gun Violence Archive. And when it comes to school shootings, definitions are even worse. The FBI does not have a definition of a school shooting, since school shootings typically fall under the definition of active shooter incident. But there are shootings, so there are shootings that happen at schools that don't fall into that active shooter category. For example, and we've seen cases of this. A kid, a teacher, sometimes a security guard brings a gun to school. It discharges accidentally, whether it injures someone or not. That's a school shooting, according to the Gun Violence Archive. If there's a shooting in the parking lot at night involving people who are not related to the school, I refer back to my aforementioned teenage gangbangers. If they happen to come to your inner city high school parking lot in the middle of the night for a drug deal and it goes bad and somebody gets shot, that's a school shooting, according to the Gun Violence Archive. They even counted an incident, at least one, probably more, where there was a shooting across the street from a school where bullets struck the outside of the school building. That's a school shooting. An accidental shooting, like I mentioned, at a school where a student, a teacher, a visitor, we've probably all seen the one where the guy who claims to be this gun, like a trainer, and he's demonstrating, talking about gun safety, and fumbles the trigger in his pocket and shoots himself in the leg. I don't remember when that was. One of the funniest videos I've ever seen, but still, that's a school shooting, according to the Gun Violence Archive. And those are not what we think of. When the average person thinks of school shooting, we think of Newtown, we think of Uvalde, we think of Parkland, we think of Columbine. But the Newtowns and the Uvaldes, the Parklands and the Columbines don't happen all that often. Maybe a handful of times a year on a bad year. That's too many to be sure, but it's not enough to gin up enough panic and fear-mongering and fundraising. So the Gun Violence Archive has a perverse incentive to inflate the numbers so that they are still relevant, so they are the go-to source for information when it comes to the media, when it comes to gun rights or anti-gun rights groups and politicians. They count all of those things that are not school shootings as school shootings in order to claim that, oh my Lord, we have hundreds of school shootings a year. And as we often talk about when it comes to terms like assault weapon, definitions matter. And the left, groups like SPLC, groups like Gun Violence Archive, they don't play fair. They don't play correct when it comes to the definitions. They play fast and loose with the truth. Anyone who opposes the trans ideology in school, they're a hate group. Anyone who thinks that homosexuality is a sin because of their religious beliefs, they're a hate group, unless you're Muslim. There's a caveat there. There's sort of a get out of jail free card when it comes to Muslims for some reason. Anyone who believes that there are two genders, it's a hate group. Anyone who has ancestors who fought in the Confederate Army during the Civil War, as I do, and who displays anything positive about the Confederacy like a flag, which I don't, they're a hate group. Anytime a gun goes off at or near a school, it's a school shooting. Anytime the Bloods and the Crips get together at a inner city nightclub or at a Memphis barbecue, it's a mass shooting. And anyone who thinks that guns are not the problem, and anyone who opposes gun control, those people have blood on their hands. Groups like groups on the left in general, they create their own narratives and they twist the truth to tug at your heartstrings, to play with your emotions. And it's not because they care about the things that they purport to be trying to solve. They don't care about your kids. They don't care about stopping violence, because if those things went away, who would send the money? They want your money. If all the guns went away and the violence stopped, which would not happen, it's still not going to happen. It's not going to happen until the second coming of Christ. If all of that stuff goes away and it's all peace and kumbaya tomorrow, guess who goes out of business and has to find a real job? People like Gabby Giffords and her spaceman husband Gollum. They have to get it. Well, he's got a job, I guess, technically as a senator, but Gabby's got to get a job. The people at Everytown, at Gun Violence Archive, they got to figure out what to do with their lives. The Brady Bunch, moms demand hot action. They'll cease to exist. What reason would there be to send them money if the problem that they claim that they want to solve has been solved? What influence would they have then on the media, on academia, on government, on entertainment? If the thing they claim to want to solve gets solved, they become irrelevant. If the extremism and the hate goes away, if everyone is tolerant in the country, I know not everything's perfect, but if all of that stuff goes away, why would people send money to a crackpot agitprop group like the SPLC? And like I said, everything's not perfect. I'm not saying that there are things that can't be improved or that racism or gun violence is okay. I'm saying that the demand for the crises outstrips the supply. It's all a con game, and the groups that profit off the hate or who profit off the death of kids, they really aren't offering any solutions, because the solutions are really the last thing that they or their bank accounts want. That's going to do it for today. If you have any thoughts or any comments or any questions, visit our feedback page at armedlutheran.us. Until we get together again for episode 481, keep shooting, keep praying. I'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.